If you don't know me, my name is Morgue. I'm an ex-Christian and an RTS survivor. My channel is about truth and blasphemy. And I can't tell you, I'm really excited about today's topic. I can't stress enough how important this topic is, because we're going to be looking at the 10 proofs for the existence of God, and we're going to refute them, but in a way that you probably aren't expecting. Now, in addition to this, these proofs are actually fairly old proofs, but they are presented by a neurosurgeon who was once an atheist and then converted to Christianity. So we have sort of a modern twist to this. And the reason why I say that we're going to refute these, but not in the way that you're expecting, is because most of these proofs, they're actually true, except what they prove is not God. I'm going to show you what they do prove and how it does not prove God, but proves something else entirely. Like I said, this is going to be an extremely important stream. I can't stress it enough. So be excited about it. Also, I want to remind you all that anyone who supports on Patreon and anyone who supports as a tier 2 member on YouTube will get access to our weekly secret live stream that's happening right after this. You will get access to my lecture notes for this video. You'll have a streamlined version of all the 10 proofs and their refutations and many of my other videos, and access to our hidden Discord server, the Citadel. We are looking for 10 proofs for the existence of God, and we are going to refute them. But these proofs are presented by a neurosurgeon named Michael Egnor. Michael Egnor used to be an atheist, but converted to Christianity. Now here's the thing. Michael Egnor is actually a very intelligent individual. So Michael Egnor went from a materialist conception of reality, meaning that he thought reality was matter and only matter, but through his work in neuroscience, realized that the brain cannot account for the mind. So he went from materialism to panpsychism, which says that matter and mind are sort of two sides of the same coin, that mind accompanies matter. And now, last I heard, he is leaning towards idealism, which says that this is an entirely mental reality and matter is only the illusion generated by mind, much like a dream. So Michael Egnor is very intelligent, and he's the one presenting these 10 proofs for God. And Hyperianism is an idealism. We also know that reality is mind and generates the illusion of matter through a mathematical process known as an ontological Fourier transform. So here's the thing though. Michael Egnor has gone too far in that now he has thought that Christianity is true. And this is why this is such an important video and is probably different than what you think, because this is a highly intelligent individual. And these 10 proofs for the existence of God are extremely good proofs. But we're going to see that they prove something else entirely. Because here is the problem. These proofs for God are going to prove that, for example, there's the problem of, it's going to prove basically that you need something eternal, that you need something necessary, you need something transcendent, you need something perfect, etc. These proofs are going to show that you need something with these qualities and properties. But here's where people trying to prove the existence of God go too far. They put these proofs and they say, okay, we have proof that you need something, there must be something transcendent in existence. And they simply go, well, that transcendent thing is God. But they don't explain how God could be transcendent. They just assert it. They don't explain how God could be eternal. They just assert it. They don't explain how God could be perfect. They just assert it. There is no how, there's no explanation, there is no reason given for how it is possible. Furthermore, just because you prove that there is a necessary, eternal, transcendent, perfect thing is a far cry from proving the God of Christianity, who created the earth in 7 days and has a God named Jesus Christ who came to earth and died for your sins, etc. Huge difference. So, and if any of this is fuzzy or unclear, stick with me as we go through all this. This is going to make a ton of sense and will unfold as we go along. So, what I'm going to show you is how this doesn't prove the existence of God, but actually proves the existence of, in Hyperianism, what we call monadic minds. To give you a quick rundown, if you are unfamiliar with Hyperianism, in Hyperianism, we are rationalists. We know that reality is rational and that reason and logic reveals the answer to existence. We know that this is exemplified through mathematics and through certain deductive processes, which I don't have time to get into now, but if you want to check out my work, you absolutely can. It has to do with monadic minds. These are certain, you might call them containers of mathematical information. And because these containers of mathematical information contain the information of the entirety of mathematics, they contain all positive values and all negative values and balance to zero. Now, if you're new to Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, that's probably a mouthful. But as I said, just stick with me, and as we go along and look at these different proofs, it will begin to make sense. And preemptively, if you want to know more about ontological mathematics was originally discovered by Pythagoras. It was brought to prominence by the great ontological mathematicians Mike Hockney, Dr. Thomas Stark, and Cody Newman. And I also have put out a book called Ontological Mathematics, The Science of the Future, and the Hyperion Source has done an excellent video series on that as well. So, now that we have laid out sort of the groundwork, even if it's a little fuzzy, let's begin with these proofs brought forward by this intelligent neuroscientist, Michael Egnor. Now, the first 5 proofs come from Thomas Aquinas, who's a very intelligent medieval philosopher. So his first proof is the observation that change exists in nature. And some of these causal chains are called instrumental chains. So instrumental change is a chain where each cause needs to continue to exist to cause the next. A good example, one that Aristotle used, was a man pushing a rock with a stick. The stick is a cause of sorts, but there needs to be a hand pushing the stick. The stick doesn't have the ability to cause things to change by itself. Now, when you have a chain of possibilities, there has to be something that causes the whole thing to start happening. And that is what all men call God. So that's Aquinas' first way. It's basically the argument that for something to happen in nature, there's got to be something at the beginning of it that is outside of nature, that has the ability to transcend nature and get things moving. So here's the claim, that to get a causal chain of events occurring in the natural world, the domain of space-time, there must be something transcendent outside of space-time to enable this causal chain to begin. And the assertion is, that's God. Well, of course, this is an excellent thought. But the question is, all right, but how is God transcendent? How does God exist outside of space-time? To just assert it is a non-explanation. So, in Hyperianism is rooted in eternal mathematical monadic minds. So eternal monadic minds exist outside space-time. We call the space-time the holos, and they exist in the frequency domain. They are transcendent and are the cause of change in space-time. Now, here's the big question. I just asserted that, just like they assert God, but they don't give an explanation. We can give an explanation to how monadic minds are transcendent. They are transcendent because they are equal to 0. How are they equal to 0? They are equal to 0 because they contain all mathematical values that perfectly balance to 0. And their net result is 0. So they are a 0. They exist within a singularity that exists outside of space and time. They are 0-dimensional with respect to space and time due to their property of having a net mathematical result of 0. Couple things I want to say here. Now see what we're doing. We're not saying that the proof is wrong. We're just saying that the proof, and you just asserting that the answer is God, you aren't giving a rational explanation to, okay, if it is God, how does God have the property of transcendence? You're just asserting it. You're giving a proof that says there must be something transcendent, and you're just saying, oh, well, the transcendent thing is God. How is God transcendent? How? What mechanism? What rational explanation can you give for that? We assert that it is not God, but eternal mathematical minds, and we can give an explanation for how it is rationally possible. You see the big and important difference. And furthermore, even if they could, let's say, give an answer for God, it doesn't prove that this is the God that created the earth in 7 days and has a son named Jesus Christ that died for your sins, etc. Proving that a transcendent thing must exist does not prove that a God exists that created that's conscious and created the earth in 7 days, etc., etc. Okay, so I want to get that out of the way. Another thing I want to mention is that, remember, we have to get through 10 different proofs, so my explanations are going to be very fast because we have to get through 10. But if you want to know them in more detail, check out the resources that I mentioned at the beginning of these videos, the different ontological mathematicians, my book, the Hyperion source, Mike Hockney, Cody Newman, all these different, Thomas Stark, all these different sources, okay? And all my other videos has explanations as well. Also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of this video, I am reading these different proofs from an article. This is an article, so I'm going to be reading these. These are quotes by different philosophers and also the voice of Thomas Egnor. When I am reading the proofs, this is what Thomas Egnor has said or quoted as what he believes are the proofs for God. So, and stick with me here because all this is going to make a lot more sense as it all unfolds. This is good to know too if you are Hyperion, because some people who are religious will bring these proofs to you and you can show them how they don't actually prove God, but prove the position of Hyperionism that's rooted in logic, reason, and mathematics, not faith, not empiricism, etc. So the second proof has to do with causation as opposed to change itself. And this is a quote, I believe by Aquinas. There is no case known, neither is it indeed possible, in which a thing is found to be the efficient cause of itself. For so it would be prior to itself, which is impossible. But if in efficient causes it is possible to go on to infinity, there will be no efficient cause, neither will be there an ultimate effect, nor any intermediate effect, efficient causes, all of which is plainly false. Therefore, it is necessary to admit a first efficient cause, to which everyone gives the name of God. So this is essentially, in a nutshell, the problem of infinite regress. So if you say that, there's a causal chain, basically. If I push over if I throw a rock, that rock will go, and that rock will, let's say, hit a person, that person will get an injury, and so you see there's a causal chain. My throwing the rock caused the rock to fly through the air, which caused the person to get an injury, which caused them to go to the hospital, which caused, it's just this huge causal chain of events. And essentially what this is saying is that unless you posit God as being a first cause, then you'll get infinite regress. You'll get this, think of it like dominoes knocking each other over. If you have dominoes knocking each other over, well, you ask your question, well, what knocked over the domino before that one, and before that one, and before that one, and before that one? Well, the previous domino, and the previous domino, and the previous domino. But the argument is basically you can't have a chain of an infinity of dominoes. There must be the first cause of someone pushing over the first domino, more or less. I'm, simplifying things, but more or less this is the argument here. And the answer is, oh, God. But again, so if you are claiming that there needs to be a first cause, which there does, your claim of God, how does God contain the properties to be the first cause? How is God the first cause? How come God doesn't need a cause itself? Why doesn't another domino, so to speak, need to happen to push God over? Why doesn't God need a cause for itself? You can't just claim something without giving a rational explanation for it, or else you are irrational. And furthermore, it doesn't claim that there's a God who created the earth in 7 days and has a son that died for your sins, etc. So, this is the problem of infinite regress. Monadic minds solve this problem because they exist eternally. And they are self-caused. See, here's the thing. Monadic minds are self-caused. They don't need anything outside of them to cause them. And that's the claim of the assertion of God, right? Well, that God doesn't need anything outside of it to cause it. God is the cause of itself, and God is the first domino pusher, so to speak. But how? How can God be the first cause, and why doesn't God need something to cause it? You can't just claim it. You have to explain it. So our answer is monadic minds. Well, how do we explain monadic minds as being self-cause and not needing anything? Well, simply, monadic minds don't need anything outside of themselves for their existence. Because monadic minds, remember, what are they? They're zero-dimensional singularities. How are they zero-dimensional singularities? They are zero-dimensional singularities by the fact that they are a full and complete consistent set of mathematics that contain every positive and negative value. Because they contain every positive and negative value, their net total result is zero. Now, because their net total of zero is zero, this means they are equivalent to nothingness. So zero and nothingness are equivalent concepts. But it's important to realize that nothingness doesn't simply mean void, utter non-existence, and emptiness. Zero means a rational total result of balanced positive and negative numbers, or energies, if you'd like to think of it that way. So mathematical minds are net resultant zeros due to their inner mathematical properties, which are rationally possible by the principle of sufficient reason. And by that virtue, they need no external cause. They have the cause, their own cause, within themselves. Why? Because they are equivalent to nothing, and nothing needs no cause. Think about it. Imagine nothingness. Do you need to do something to cause nothingness? No. Nothingness is. Rationally speaking, nothingness must exist because it needs nothing external to it for its existence. You can't create nothing because it's nothing. Neither can you destroy nothing because it's nothing. Nothing needs no external cause. Its cause is contained within itself due to its virtue of containing the mathematical structure of positive and negative values, which result in zero. Its cause is contained within itself. So do you see the difference here? Whereas in religion, like Christianity, you have this proof of infinite regress needing a first cause. Why, though? Why? If you say God, how and why? How is God able to exist without an external cause? How? No rational explanation is given. In Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, we absolutely can. With eternal monadic minds, which are mathematical structures whose net result is zero dimensionality, they contain their cause within themselves by the virtue of their mathematical structure and being equivalent to nothingness. No external cause is needed. You see the huge difference here. In Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, when it comes to the deductive foundation, you can't just assert, you can't just claim something without giving a rational explanation as to how and why, etc. Next proof. The third way is the argument that in order for anything to exist contingently, that is, it might not exist, but it does exist, there must be one thing that necessarily exists. For example, I might not exist, I might die, or I might never have been born. Everything can't be contingent, everything can't depend on everything else, because then you get circular reasoning. So there must be a necessary existence for anything contingent to exist. So that's the ultimate claim here. So let me explain to you real quick the difference between contingency and necessity. Contingency is something that perhaps exists, but doesn't have to exist. For example, this cup is black. It exists, but it exists contingently. You can imagine a world where this cup wasn't black, where it was green. You can imagine a world where this cup was never created at all, that no one ever, made it. You can imagine a world where this cup had a completely different shape. It's contingent. It exists, but it doesn't have to exist. Everything around you, everything in the space-time world is contingent. It exists, but it doesn't have to exist. It could have existed in another way, in a different way. So that's contingent existence. Necessary existence, however, is something that has to exist. It must exist. You can't imagine a world where it does not exist. So what, and so the claim is, right? I'm going to give you an example of necessary existence. But the claim is, we live in a world of contingent existence. For this contingency to exist, there must be something that necessarily exists for anything contingent to exist. And the claim is, that's God. Okay, fine. You can prove that necessary existence is required. And that's true. But you can't just say, and that's God. You have to say, how is God necessary? How is it that God has necessary existence? What properties does God contain that would qualify you to say that God has necessary existence? Again, it's simply an assertion. Now, what are our answers? Of course, that something that necessarily exists is that something must exist, and this, yes, true. What is the answer? Again, eternal mathematical monadic minds. How? Well, here's the thing. Remember I gave you all the different examples of contingent existence, things that do exist or can exist, but don't have to have existed or could have existed in a different way. You can imagine a world in which they didn't exist. It doesn't violate the rules of reason for them not to have existed, right? If this cup never existed, it doesn't violate the rules of reason. If this cup was orange, it doesn't violate the rules of reason. Necessary existence must exist, and to say they didn't would violate reason. Now, what is it that meets those requirements? Mathematics. Mathematics. So, think of, in a very simplistic example, think of 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 = 4 is an eternal truth. It can't not exist. It must exist. Furthermore, if you try to imagine that it didn't exist, you would break the rules of reason. For example, if you say 2 plus 2 is not 4, that breaks reason. You see? If you say 2 plus 2 does not equal 4, that is a false statement. It violates the rules of reason. If you say 2 plus 2 equals 5, it violates reason. If you say 2 plus 2 equals 672, it violates reason. Mathematics is the necessary eternal truths of existence. Remember, what are our definition of monadic minds? They are the eternal, complete, and consistent laws of mathematics. So do you need a necessary existent? Yes, you do. Is it God? If you're going to claim it's God, you have to you can't just say, oh, it's God. How? What properties of God justify you to say that it has necessary existence? We can easily give the answer. Our answer is monadic minds, and the answer is that they have necessary existence by virtue of they are mathematical entities, a complete and consistent set of mathematics. Mathematics is a necessary existent. Furthermore, the net result of monadic minds being that they have both balanced positive and negative values, they result in 0. 0 must exist. 0 can't not exist. It's impossible for 0 not to exist, because remember, 0 is equivalent to nothingness. You cannot stop nothingness from existing. Nothingness is something that you cannot create and you cannot destroy. Nothingness is. Nothingness can't not exist. It must exist. It has necessary existence, and this is possible by its virtue of its necessary mathematical properties that we just discussed. Are you beginning to see the power and the beauty of Hyperianism and ontological mathematics? It's not that these proofs are wrong. It's that the answer of God is wrong, because no rational explanation as to how God has these properties is ever given. It's simply an assertion. And furthermore, it doesn't prove that there's some guy in the sky that created the earth in 7 days and his son came to die for he died for blah, 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 blah. No. It's a ridiculous extrapolation. So anyway, I hope you're beginning to see the power. So let's continue to the fourth way. The fourth way is that we recognize degrees of perfection in reality. These degrees of perfection point to an ultimate perfection, because you can't really talk about degrees of perfection unless there's an extreme to which those degrees point, and that degree of perfection is God. So again, it's God. The idea here is that there are degrees of perfection in reality. Because there are degrees of perfection in reality, there must be an ultimate perfection to even make the idea of perfection comprehensible. So that ultimate perfection must be God. Again, I hope you can see how ridiculous it is just to go, well, that's God. How? How is God perfect? By what definition and property do you define perfection? What is perfection? How do you define it? How is God perfect? Etc. Again, our answer easily. It's not God. It's monadic minds. And monadic minds are perfect because the laws of mathematics are perfect. Mathematics is the ultimate exemplar of perfection. And furthermore, always back to 0. 0 is the ultimate perfection because, why? It exhibits perfect balance, perfect symmetry. For every positive value, there is also a negative value, and the net result of that total is 0, which is nothingness. So we have the perfect laws of mathematics in perfect balance, perfect harmony, and perfect symmetry. So I hope you guys are excited about this stuff, because I cannot stress to you enough the power and importance of what we are talking about here. These are the secrets of existence. This is information that no one in humanity has understood except for an extremely small percentage. The fifth way is the teleological proof. Inanimate things in nature follow patterns of behavior. Rocks, when we drop them, fall down. They don't fall up. Electrons go around protons. They don't just shoot off into space for no reason. Nature is full of natural laws that have consistency. But the things that obey these laws don't have minds. They're not capable of knowing what they're supposed to do. A rock doesn't know it's supposed to go down when you let it go instead of going up. And the fact that inanimate things don't know what to do but do it anyway implies that there is a mind guiding things. This is kind of an intelligent design argument that nature shows this elegant example of design and of purpose. And so that must be God. Okay, again, how and why? Explain, give a rational reason as to why and how. So if you notice here, and even like there's an unconscious display of our position, because here it is that this, again, reading what Michael Egnor says, this implies that there is a mind guiding things. What is our answer? Our answer is that it is mathematical monadic minds. Their answer is just, it's God. How is it God? Why is it God? Did God wave his magic God wand and make all this happen? How? So here's our response. As I've been talking about the properties of monadic minds. These monadic minds are complete and consistent set of mathematics that resolve to zero, etc. Now, this is going a little further than what I have explained so far, but it is explained in detail in my material, my book, and the resources that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I'm going to sum it up real quick, but if you want more detail, check it out. But here's the thing. So monadic minds are the complete and consistent set of mathematics. Now, how this is expressed ontologically, ontological means what is real, is through frequency. So frequency, because when I say that reality is, mathematical minds are, a complete and consistent set of mathematics. Well, what does that really mean? Does that mean there's like ones and twos and threes floating around in some transcendent space? No, of course not. So how mathematics is, remember, because in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics isn't abstract dead numbers on paper. That's just how humans interpret it. What true ontological mathematics is living mathematics, which means it's living mind, and this is expressed as frequency. So instead of having different numbers, you have waves oscillating at different frequencies. Same thing though, it's just mathematical structure and mathematical relation. You have frequencies at different values, different oscillations, it's all rational relationships. So anyway, to say that a monadic mind is a mathematical entity and contains all the laws of mathematics also means it contains frequency waves when defined with respect to pure angle, instead of any kind of space-time concept, but pure angle, such as radians or something like this. It does not depend on space or time for its existence. It's pure mathematical relationship. It's pure information expressed as frequency. So in Hyperianism, because these frequencies result in zero, they are equivalent to mind because they have no spatial extent. They don't have any length in space, no width in space, and they don't exist independently of minds. They are contained within minds and they are zero-dimensional. So this is also mind. So it's important to see the connection between mathematics, frequency, and mind. Mathematics, these are what monadic minds are, complete and consistent contains of mathematics. Ontologically, this is expressed as frequency, and it is mind because it is zero-dimensional and is defined with relation to itself and information and angle. It has nothing to do, it is not defined with respect to space-time, etc. So a little bit of a mouthful. Imagine if I tried to explain all of quantum physics in like 5 minutes. It's hard to break down math into a quick bite-sized line, but I'm doing my best. Check out the work that I mentioned if you want full explanations. So the whole idea was that how do inanimate things in space and time follow the rules that they do? It implies that some kind of mind is guiding this process. And the assertion is, oh, it's God. Do you need mind to guide this process? Yes, but if you're going to say it's God, you have to give a rational explanation as to how. Again, did he wave his magic God wand? How does he do this? Is it magic? What? How does he do this? We can give this answer. So remember, mathematical minds are containers of frequencies, frequency containers. So frequency containers are the result of, net result being to zero. So you have many monadic minds. So here's the thing. When you have frequency interacting with each other, there is a process in mathematics known as a Fourier transform. And you can take frequency information and through a mathematical process, which is valid because it's a mathematical reality, it is in accord with the laws of reason, it is rational. Through a mathematical process known as a Fourier transform, you can trans frequency information into space and or time information, which means you can take frequency information and transform that through its various combinations through a mathematical process called a Fourier transform into space and time. It's amazing. If you haven't heard of this before, it's amazing. Look into it. It's used in signal processing. It's used in almost everything you can possibly imagine. Wireless communications, music, video, like everything you can possibly imagine relies on Fourier transforms. Quantum mechanics, matter, almost everything. Well, we know literally everything. But so here's this idea. You have mathematical minds that contain frequency. Through Fourier transform, frequency can be transformed into space and time. So what does that mean? It means that all reality is guided and made up of the information contained within these mathematical minds. So when you look at something like this cup, what this cup is a space-time transformation of frequency information. Frequency information are frequencies contained in individual monadic minds. So in a nutshell, what does this mean? It means, to put it simplistically, that this cup isn't actually material. It is our experience from the space-time perspective of a collective thought. This cup is not a material object that has existence outside of or independently of you and I as a mind. This cup depends on the existence of us as eternal monadic minds because it is a collective thought. Now, if that seems wild to you, you do it every time you go to sleep and dream. When you go to sleep and dream and you have the dream objects in your world, the dream chair, the dream cup, the dream tree, the dream rabbit, all these different dream things, they are your personal thoughts expressed as and externalized and experienced as a dream object. So the exact same thing is happening in this world right here and right now, except they're not just your thoughts, they're the thoughts of all monadic minds in existence that contribute to it. So the frequency contributions of this cup contains frequency contributions from all the minds in existence. When you go to sleep and dream and you have a dream, you can change things by thinking about it when you're lucid because they're your dream contents to change. You cannot change this cup into whatever you want by thinking about it because your frequency contributions to this cup are infinitesimally small because it's being contributed to and constituted by all the frequencies of all the minds in existence. So your contribution to it is so infinitesimal that a change to it is not going to result in any kind of measurable change whatsoever. So again, the whole assertion here is that space-time must have a mind that guides things. The assertion is God is that mind. How? How is God that mind? And I think you can tell through that time that it took me to explain it. I gave a and that's a summary. I gave a very detailed response as to how this is possible. Monadic minds containing various frequency components through a Fourier transform expresses the components as space-time representations, which are all the objects that you experience around you. Do you see the difference? I just don't see. This is the difference between Hyperianism and religion and even science, empirical science, etc. Empirical science is another topic. I don't want to get too into that, so let's just stick with religion and whatnot for now, for today's topic. But I don't just go, oh, monadic minds are the answer. Well, how? I don't know. No, we give a clear and consistent rational explanation. Can this happen when you with the answer of God? No, it's just God's the answer. Well, how? How does God do that? Well, God is just beyond our understanding. We don't know. God works in mysterious ways. Our human minds are just too tiny to understand how. I don't know. He did, though. Do you see how that's saying that giving the answer of God is a non-explanation? It's not an answer. It's an anti-answer. It is a null answer. Instead of saying God, you might as well say gobbledygook or bibblybob. It's not, you aren't explaining anything. You aren't explaining anything. You are creating this container called God where you are shoving in all the things you can't answer. And you've just called it God. You could have called it anything. You call it a snarf waffle. This is not an answer. So do you see the big difference? In Hyperianism and Aunt Math, we're not just saying, oh, it's this. We're saying it's this, and here is a detailed rational explanation as to how. Big difference. Please, burn that into your minds. It's so important. The sixth proof is, we got to move through this here. The sixth proof is something that's called the Thomistic proof, and it differs from the first five. The sixth proof is a notion that the essence of something, what something is, and the fact that it exists are two separate things. Okay, so the essence of something is what something is, and the existence of something is the fact that it exists. Okay? I can describe something without it actually existing, or I can point to the fact that it actually exists. And there needs to be something outside of the system that connects possibilities with actualities of existence. There needs to be something that is essentially existence itself. And that is what all men call God. So again, basically, there has to be something that is essentially existence itself. There has to be something that its essence is existence. What it is, right? Essence is what something is, and existence is that it exists. There has to be something where its essence is existence. So, what is its essence? Existence, and it exists. And this must be. There must be this. That's what the proof says. There must be this. So what is this? It's God. Okay, how? How does God, so this is also known as aseity in theology. Aseity is the property of existence being its essence, where there is a thing that is existence itself. Okay, so it's God. How? How is God existence itself? Tell me, please. Please, I'd love to know. How is God existence itself? What is the answer? Of course, as you know, essence is what a thing is. Existence is the fact that it exists. And for monadic minds, existence is their essence. They are existence. Now, how? How is it possible that monadic minds have this property of aseity, which means existence is their essence, which means they are existence itself? How are monadic minds existence itself? Monadic minds are existence itself by the fact that they are net zeros. They are a mathematical structure that perfectly balances to zero, which means, remember, they are equivalent to nothingness. Nothingness must exist. It can't not exist. Remember, we went through this already. Nothingness cannot not exist. It must exist. It has to have existence. There is nothing that can prevent its existence. And you see, its essence is to exist. What is it? It is the thing that is. It has to be. It must be. Existence is its essence. How is it? By the fact that its internal structure results in zero, which is nothingness. This is how its essence, what it is existence. So existence isn't really what people normally think it is. Existence is nothingness, but it's not nothingness as in non-existence. Nothingness and non-existence are two separate concepts, okay? Remember that. Nothingness and non-existence, two separate concepts. We're not talking about non-existence. We're talking about nothingness, which is a net result of zero and perfect balanced structure. This thing, nothingness, rationally can exist. If you accept that reason explains existence, logically and rationally this can exist by the virtue of the fact that it is equal to zero, and nothing can logically or rationally prevent its existence, and it must exist. Again, try and think of how you would rationally stop nothingness from existing. You can't rationally stop nothingness from existing. You can't do it. You can't rationally create nothing either. So by the fact you can't rationally create nothing, and by the fact that you can't rationally stop nothing, that means what it is existence. You see? You can't stop it from existing. It is existence. You see? It's beautiful and elegant and rational. Again, please understand the power of this. This is the future. So get on board with it now. Don't wait. Get on board with this now, for those with the eyes to see, for those that can understand the power here. So, existence is its essence. Again, it is existence itself. And not only do we know that existence is its essence by all the reasons that I have given, but we also know by its internal properties of being composed of frequency, and through a rational process of a mathematical Fourier transform can express its internal structure as the space-time world around you. So not only have we given an explanation to how this thing can exist and how it is existence and how existence is its essence, how it has a aseity, not only that, but we have given an explanation as to how it can generate the entire space-time world. What does religion/theology do? Just go, oh, it's God. How? Not only do we explain how, but we explain the mechanism as to how it can generate everything around you. The seventh proof is sometimes called the Neoplatonic proof. There needs to be a singular, infinitely powerful cause of the organization of objects in the world. That is, objects bear relationships to one another. They bear geometrical relationships. Sounds familiar, huh? They bear causal relationships. And to put this whole orchestra together requires an infinitely powerful metaphysical simple entity, which is God. So there needs to be a singularly infinitely powerful cause of the organization of objects in the world because of geometrical relationships, etc., and causal relationships. So it's God. All right, again, yeah, all right, fine. But how? How? The proof isn't wrong. It's your answer that is incorrect because you can't give a rational explanation for the existence of the entity that you assert. So what is our answer again? Our answer is simply mathematical monadic minds. So mathematical monadic minds are the cause and are responsible for the relationship between all things. Why? Because mathematical law is relation. Mathematical law is literally relation. So the whole idea here, oh, look at all the relationships in reality. Well, there must be something, some singular thing that is the cause of all these relations. How, why, etc. Please give us answers instead of just God. The answer is mathematical monadic minds. How? Because mathematics is literally relation itself. It is relation. So of course it can be responsible for all relation. Because it is the concept of relation. If you remove mathematics, there would no longer be relation. So, also, but what about this idea of it being a singular entity? Well, here's the idea here. And so their proof is a little bit wrong. And Hegel would understand this because the answer is actually a little more subtle than this. So there is not a single entity. And there are not many entities. There is one and many at the same time. And the great philosopher Hegel, who was, I won't get into it because we're pressed for time here. But he understood that things that seem like contradictions, if you understand them rationally, you see that through reason, they aren't necessarily contradictions. So, for example, mathematical monadic minds, there are many of them. Why? Why are there many of them? Because they're mathematically equivalent to 0. And if 1 0 is possible, you can have many zeros existing. Why? Because we know 0 is possible, and 0 plus 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 0 is still 0. So do you see now we have a concept of 1 and many. We have one concept of 0, but there can be many zeros. Do you see how it's 1 and many at the same time? So the idea here is that there are many mathematical monadic minds that form a collective that in Hyperianism we call this collective the source, which is simply a singularity, a mathematical singularity outside space and time that is the collection of all mathematical monadic minds who themselves are zero-dimensional singularities. So again, it's because 0 is both 1 and many at the same time. 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0 is still the concept of 0. It's still a singular concept, but it can be, this universal can be expressed in particularity. I won't get into this today. But the universal concept can particularize itself. And so there is actually the collection of monadic minds that become conscious of themselves in Hyperianism we know as the absolute. One of the ultimate goals of Hyperianism is to raise all members of the earth eventually to what we call absolute consciousness, and this is the understanding of the universal absolute nature of reality, which is the collective as expressed as a sort of what we might call a monadic neural network. I'm not going to get into that today because again it would take me too long. We need to get through this, but I hope you can see again we can give clear rational explanations to this. Not just go, it's God. The 8th proof is the Augustinian proof, and that is the proof that concepts such as mathematical concepts and universals like justice and mercy clearly have some kind of real existence that's independent of human minds. Otherwise, we couldn't communicate them to one another. The realm in which these exist, Plato called the world of forms, and St. Augustine made the argument, I think a very good argument, that a much more reasonable way to understand this is that universals exist in the mind of God. So they do have a real existence, and their existence is the divine intellect. All right, again, so, and I think you know where this is going, concepts such as mathematical concepts are universals. And they must have some kind of existence. Mathematical ideas must have some kind of existence. And mathematical ideas aren't anything physical, the concept themselves. Mathematical frequency can express itself through the physical, but there's a difference between what you experience and the universal idea itself. There is a difference between experiencing a cup and the idea of a cup. There's a difference between experience a rainbow and the understanding of the frequency that rainbow, the experience of that rainbow is conveyed upon, transmitted through. We have syntax and semantics, form and content. So anyway, the concepts themselves are universals, like the concept of mathematics. And you see, well, you know, here's the thing. We have these concepts of universals like mathematics. Well, how can that be? They must exist in the mind of God. God is the answer. How? How is this possible? Again, our answer is very easy. Mathematics is the ultimate universal. Mathematics is the ultimate universal. Everything stems from the laws of mathematics. And in Hyperianism, mathematics and reason are synonymous. To fully explain that would take a little too much time, but just so you know. So mathematics is the ultimate universal. Mathematics is how reason is expressed. It is the structure and expression of reason. But remember, this is living mathematics, not dead abstract mathematics. So mathematics is the ultimate universal, and monadic minds are living mathematics. So this universal domain, this Platonic realm of forms talked about in this proof, is the monadic domain of pure mind, what we called, right, I mentioned this in the last one, the source. That is the, in Platonic terms, the domain of forms. It's the source, the domain of mind. And again, so how can mathematical concepts like universals exist? They're in the mind of God. How? How are in the mind of God? Our answer, easily answered, has been answered throughout this whole video. Monadic minds are mathematical entities, and they contain the entire structure of mathematics. How do we know that this is possible? Because logically and rationally, they are equivalent to zero, which means they must exist because nothing can prevent their existence, and thus they contain all balanced positive and negative values in a perfect, complete, and consistent structure. It doesn't fall afoul of any kind of Gödelian incompleteness or inconsistency because it does not rest on multiple axioms. It rests on a single axiom, which is the PSR, the principle of sufficient reason. It's complete, consistent, perfect. I think you can see. I could talk about all day long, whereas theologians and whatnot are completely silent. They just go, "It's God." You see the power of Hyperianism in ontological mathematics. So, the ninth proof is sometimes called the rationalist proof, and the rationalist proof, which was championed by Leibniz several hundred years ago, is the notion that everything that exists necessarily has some explanation for why it exists the way it does. That is, that things don't exist for no reason. That doesn't mean that we can know the reasons. The reasons may be obscure, but it doesn't make any sense to say that something exists and there is no reason for it. And that implies there is an ultimate explanation that is outside of nature and is not itself in need of an explanation, and that is God. And so, okay, so here's a really interesting thing. So Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz is a very important figure in Hyperianism. He's a mathematician, and he was inventor of calculus. And guess what? He came out with a book called The Monadology, and he believed that reality was composed of infinitesimal monadic minds. Now, Leibniz's definition of monadic minds are slightly different than ours, but it's similar. And so you see the really interesting thing here is here you have this proof trying to assert God, and they're using Leibniz to do it. And Leibniz's answer to this was God, but Leibniz's answer to this was that I don't want to get into too much into this, but ultimately, you could go look up the monadology. Reality is composed of infinite monads, and yes, there is one sort of God monad that organizes everything, all the other monads together. But in Hyperianism, that is not the case. In Hyperianism, what you would call the one is simply us as a collective. It's the monadic neural network. It's not something that exists outside of us and organizes us. It is what we are. It's us as a group, as a collective, as the many, as the one as opposed to the many. It is us together as a collective. So, anyways, and what they're talking about here about things requiring reason, this is known as the principle of sufficient reason. And this is so important to Hyperianism that it is absolutely the bedrock of Hyperianism and ontological mathematics. And essentially what the principle of sufficient reason says is that for everything that exists, you have to give a reason for how it exists in the way that it does and not in a different way. In a nutshell, what this means is that if something exists, you have to be able to give an explanation as to how it can rationally exist in that way and not in some kind of different way. And you can't just say, oh, God did it, or it's magic, or, for example, why is this glass filled with water? What is the rational explanation for why this glass is filled with water? It's filled with water because I went to the sink and filled it up with water. I can't just go, oh, God did it, or it magically happened. For everything that exists, you have to be able to give a sufficient reason as to why it exists in the way it does, and not some other kind of way. Now, that doesn't mean it has to be a material explanation, and it also doesn't mean it has to be a causal explanation in the traditional way as causality is understood. You can talk about mind as being the explanation as long as it's rational. And you see, the whole point is here, instead of just going, oh, it's God, the whole point throughout my entire video is going, okay, give me a rational explanation as to why God is able to have the properties that you are claiming that it does. The answer of God is a violation of the principle of sufficient reason, unless you can give a rational explanation as to this. So, if you're going to say that God is not in need of an explanation, you must answer why God is not in need of an explanation. If you're going to claim, well, God's not in need of an explanation, you have to explain why. Why is God not in need of an explanation? So again, as I said, the law mentioned is known as the principle of sufficient reason. It's the bedrock of Hyperianism and ontological mathematics. The reason for the existence of monadic minds is, as I said, they are mathematically equivalent to nothingness, and nothingness must exist. Nothingness exists because there isn't anything that can prevent its existence. I've gone through this already. Its existence is self-contained. Its essence is existence. It has aseity. In fact, zero is the ontological expression of the principle of sufficient reason. Ontological zero is the PSR. Now, what does this mean? So you have this idea of the principle of sufficient reason, which is that for everything that exists, there must be a sufficient reason of what that exists and not otherwise. Well, the question is, what is the principle of sufficient reason? I mean, if the principle of sufficient reason is true, what is it? It's not like there's some tablet in the sky where, in some transcendental domain where it's inscribed in human words, the principle of sufficient reason. For everything that exists, there must be a sufficient reason as to why it exists. Obviously not, right? That would be very silly to think about that. But people don't think about these things. What is the principle of sufficient reason? The principle of sufficient reason, expressed ontologically, as in what it really is the concept of zero. And remember, the concept of zero is the perfect mathematical structure because it's perfect balance. So from reason itself, we have all the laws of mathematics. Because the law, if you concur that this is a rational reality, then we can show and you can know that reality is founded on the principle of sufficient reason. And again, it's not like this is just scrawled on some transcendental piece of paper floating in the void. This is, the PSR is the ontological, or zero is the ontological expression of the principle of sufficient reason. Zero is the principle of sufficient reason because it's perfectly balanced. For every positive, there's a negative. And that's essentially the principle of sufficient reason is about perfect, rational balance. And again, this does not, if anyone knows anything about the Gödelian incompleteness and inconsistency theorems, our system does not fall afoul of Gödelian incompleteness and inconsistent. In fact, Gödel's work is very important to Hyperianism and ontological mathematics because it shows that mathematics can never be founded on a system that is multi-axiomatic, invented by humans, that depends on multiple axioms. Essentially what this means, what Gödel essentially showed in a nutshell, is that mathematics cannot be invented by human logic. And so in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, this absolutely supports our position, and mathematics is consistent and complete because it does not depend on human invented logic. It depends on only the principle of sufficient reason, which ontologically is zero, which is a single axiom. Hence is both ontological and tautological, and tautology has no inconsistency or incompleteness. So continue on to the 10th and final proof. We made it. So this is Michael Egnor talking, the 10th proof, which I think is a very powerful way that we often overlook, is the existence of moral law. We all acknowledge in our daily life implicitly that we should do it explicitly. And there is an objective morality out there that's separate from our minds. That is, we all acknowledge, for example, that it's not okay to kill innocent people. And that's not just an opinion. It's not as if, well, I don't think it's okay to kill innocent people, but hey, if the guy next to me thinks it's okay, well, who knows? We all acknowledge that certain things are right and wrong in objective ways that are beyond human opinion. And of course, if there is a moral law that manifests objective right and wrong, then that moral law has to exist in the mind outside of man, which means God's mind. To deny his existence is to deny the existence of any objective moral law. All right, now I have some interesting things to say about this one. So all the other proofs are good proofs. I'm not trying to say that the other proofs are false. I'm saying that your answer as God is an irrational answer unless you can provide a rational explanation, to which you can't, because you literally say in one of your proofs that God needs no rational explanation, but you don't give a why or to a how or to what mechanism. You don't give any kind of rational, plausible way this could be the case. So this 10th one, however, it's not good, because the claim here is that there's some this is moral absolutism. Moral absolutism, whereas there's this objective moral law that everyone can agree on. Now, this is just, I mean, I'm sorry, Michael Egnor is a smart guy to a certain extent, but this is just dumb. It's blatantly incorrect. It's not at all obvious to everyone on Earth what right and wrong is. I mean, think about it. There have been countless wars, bloodshed, violence, religions have begun, and people have been divided because they can't agree on what's right and wrong. It's not perfectly obvious to all of humanity what right and wrong is. Much of human history has been disputes and arguments over to what is right and wrong. It's not at all universally clear what is right and wrong. And okay, so why is this? This is because moral absolutism is false. There is no list of right and wrongs that exist. There is no 10 commandments of thou shalt not this, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not blah, blah, blah. There is no list of moral absolutism. What is there? There is only unity and division. Okay? There is only unity and division. And this is a mathematical concept. Mathematically, we can understand this as symmetry and asymmetry. Okay? So remember, it's a mathematical concept. Everything's a mathematical concept. It's symmetry and asymmetry. But through human language, we can understand this as unity and division. So there is no list of no moral absolutism, no list of rights and wrongs. There is only unity and division. Now, on this side of the dialectic, which means where we currently reside in the current cosmic cycle, that which leads to net unity is good, and that which leads to net division is bad. Now, when you get past the omega point to the other end of the dialectic, that doesn't necessarily apply anymore. But that's a whole nother topic, and I need to talk about that further to really impound that. But let's not talk about that, because that has to do with the end of the universe and the beginning of a new Big Bang. That is not in the scope of this video. So let's, for now, restrict ourselves to our current place in space and time, and our current place in the cosmic age and this cosmic cycle. Our current place in space and time. Right now, on this side of the dialectic, where we are in space and time currently, there is no list of absolute right and wrongs. There is only unity and division. What is right is what leads to net unity, while what leads to net division is bad. Now, I could do a whole video on this. Please remember, this is very simplified. Very, very simplified. So keep that in mind. There's a lot of, nuances to this. So remember this, but the actions that will lead to net unity and net division are based on reason and not moral absolutism. What does this mean? Moral absolutism means there's a list of eternal rights and wrongs. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not blah, 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 blah. That's moral absolutism. That is false. What is true is reason. What leads to net unity is good. What leads to net division is bad. But the particular actions that lead to net unity or lead to net division will change. There's no list. We exercise our reason to discover what leads us to net unity and what leads us to net division. For example, if you're talking about moral absolutism, you have the idea, thou shalt not kill. Never, you should never kill. But hey, when you exercise reason, what if someone's trying to kill you and you're being attacked? Can you defend yourself? What about, I think about all the different things. for certain reasons. I don't want to give specific examples for each one. But if you think about it for more than 5 minutes, or at least 5 minutes, you can think of rational justifications for actions where sometimes an action will lead to net unity and sometimes they will lead to net division. There is no unchanging lists of right and wrongs. The actions change according to the situation. Okay? Because this is not a static reality. This is a constantly evolving, transforming reality. Sometimes to reach net unity, we have to make compromises. Sometimes we have to make hard choices. Sometimes we have to make hard decisions. It's not as easy as just having a simple list that we follow. We have to use reason. We have to use our minds. Now, how is this expressed ontologically? Again, the concepts of unity and division are inherent to monadic minds since they are the laws of mathematics, because mathematically, unity and division is symmetry and asymmetry, and this is exemplified in the laws of mathematics. Symmetry and asymmetry is a mathematical concept, so this is where we get reality as a mathematical self-solving equation. This is where we get the ideas of unity and division. If I wanted to really get into it, it has to do with waveforms and orthogonality and phase, but we won't get into that today. But here you can see, even in this 10th proof, which I think is absolutely absurd and completely wrong, there is no moral absolutism, we can use the answer of monadic minds to not only give an explanation as to what morality is, and that it's not moral absolutism, but how it is mathematically fulfilled. So, again, these are the 10 proofs. Now, except for the last one, I agree with these for the most part. I don't want to get into the nuances, but for the most part, generally. But the answer of God is wrong. Okay? I can't stress to you enough how important this video is. Take notes, watch it over and over again, understand it. This is a critical video because you have these proofs for something that needs to exist. For example, something that is necessary, something that is universal, something that is transcendent. Do you need necessary, universal, something that is necessary, universal, and transcendent? Absolutely you do. But is it an explanation to just say, and it's God? No. You have to give a rational explanation as to how the thing that you are claiming is the answer is transcendent, is perfect, is necessary, is universal, is all the different traits that we looked at. You have to give a rational explanation to every single one of these. And in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, we can provide an absolute rational, not only provide an absolute rational explanation, but an extremely detailed rational explanation that I could talk about all fucking day long if I wanted to. Do you see the power here? Do you see the difference? And furthermore, even if they could give a rational explanation for God, which they can't because it's not true, but if they could, let's say they could, saying that a transcendent, universal, necessary being exists does not mean that that God is named Jehovah and created the earth in 7 days and sent his son to die for your sins and through him walked on water and died on a cross. That is a huge extrapolation. That is an extreme violation of any sense of reason you could possibly comprehend. It's the most absurd violation and irrational extrapolation, all right? Proving that there is some necessary, eternal, universal thing does not prove talking snakes and, walking on water, man. You see the difference? So, God is not an explanation. It's a non-explanation. As I said, you're not giving an explanation. You could call it a snibberwonkle if you wanted to. You're just giving a name of something that you are not giving any properties or any explanations to. Violation of reason. Now, in Hyperianism and ontological mathematics, we absolutely can. This is an eternal mathematical domain that follows the principle of sufficient reason, that is founded on, that results in net zero, following Fourier transforms, blah, blah, blah. Watch the whole, I could talk for hours and hours about the rational explanation to all these things. Now, I want to make it clear, though, that, you know, sometimes in Hyperianism, we all often say we are God. Okay. Now you might be thinking, well, didn't you just say God is a non-answer? Yes, as an external creator God, etc., that is wrong. However, in Hyperianism, we look at ourselves as God because look, we know that we are monadic minds, and monadic minds have taken the place of God. Monadic minds are the answer, are the true rational, mathematical, and logical answer that have true rational, mathematical, detailed explanations to what people try and fit God into, this non-answer. So we are the answer as mathematical minds. We are the answer to the proofs of God. The proofs for God prove that we are God. Do you see? They prove that we are God because we are mathematical minds. So in Hyperianism, we are all eternal mathematical minds. Together, we form a collective, which is, you can think of it as a monadic neural network, which is one system. That is in Hyperianism what we call the absolute. And that is us working in harmony as one, because you can look at it as one and many at the same time. Many monadic minds that form one collective. One mind in that case, but that one mind is us. It can't exist without us. It is us. It is us when we work together in harmony and cooperation and become conscious of what we are as all reality and the universe as we obtain absolute consciousness. And like the philosopher Hegel realized, we are God coming to self-knowledge of itself through ourselves. And do you see this video putting out this information is the system, God, becoming aware of itself. Please realize how important this is. Can't stress this enough. This Hyperianism, what you are watching right now, everything that I am explaining to you, this is God explaining to God, you, what it is. It's God becoming aware of itself. It's mathematics becoming aware of itself through itself, that it is mathematics, that it is the creator, that it is everything, that it is all things. That it is the generator of space-time. I don't really want to say creation because nothing is truly created, but it's generated. Everything is eternal, but contingent things are generated. Do you see? This is the next step in human evolution. It's not even human, it's Hyperion. There was a time where humans, went from this animalistic consciousness to a self-awareness where they realized that, oh, hey, we're self-aware, we're individual things. What is happening right now in this video, right before you, and the transmission of this information and you understanding this video is going from a self-consciousness to the beginnings of absolute consciousness as God realizes that it is God. Not as some, airy-fairy guy in the sky, but as mathematical monadic minds that are the generators of this reality. This is the birth of a new consciousness. We are that birth. We are that collective. We are God coming to self-realization. So, I hope that, please, again, I know I've said it so many times, very important video. Please watch it multiple times. So, I want to tell you guys, I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports on Patreon, especially Timothy, Renaissance Fairy, and Jordy. You guys are awesome. Big shout out to everyone that supports on Patreon. My lecture notes for this video will be available for Patreon supporters, as well as those who support on Tier 2 on YouTube. Also, you'll get access to our secret weekly live streams. We're having one pretty much right now, right after this. And access to our hidden Discord server, the Citadel. Your support means a lot. That's how I'm able to make these videos, create, and continue. So thank you very, very much.